Hi, I'm R.R. Moore, and welcome to Info Prime. Here I hope to provide you with information not normally available, or at least enhance your understanding on a wide variety of topics. This installment offers information on. Today, I want to share some information on what can be called the Great Scare Story of the 21st century. Back during the Cold War, we used to hear the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. That scare story was actually hogwash, but details on that are for another time. Today, the great scare tactic is global warming. Oh, I'm sorry, I mean climate change. They had to change the name due to actual facts being uncovered. In this video, you may be presented with information you didn't know, or just maybe data you haven't considered. We're being pelted across the globe almost continually with media stories of the dangers and calamities awaiting us from global warming. Oops, sorry again, climate change. This is nothing but a scare tactic with absolutely nothing scientifically to prove the often offered theory of climate change. Remember, a theory is just a supposition yet to be proven. And as this video progresses, I will offer real, actual evidence of my claim. Remember and be aware that the same types of people bringing us the climate change scare today are the types who brought us the global cooling scare of the 1970s. The people in the 70s didn't have the degree of resources or political clout available to affect such a propaganda scheme as we see today. Should we choose to believe the climate change theories or not, this video offers what is referred to in the legal world as res ipsa loquitur, Latin for the thing speaks for itself, or specifically in this case, the facts speak for themselves. By a definition of sorts, climate change in the stories we see actually is meant to imply human-caused climate change, human activities that result in higher levels of greenhouse gases, most notably CO2, which will result in widespread destruction across the globe. But is all, or any of this, real? Or is it an application of what I like to call follow the chase for control and money? Well, let's take a look. Most of us are aware that climate alarmists, those supporting the climate change narrative, state that the science is settled. Were that true, their theory would be called fact, not theory. Also, our brains should go on high alert when we hear things like, I'm from the government and I'm only here to help. The check is in the mail. You can take that to the bank, and the science is settled. Sometimes what we hear may or may not be true based solely on where we are or when we choose to look. As an example, we all know that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Well, not if you're in Denver or Tibet. As to this simple observation, everything presented in this video may easily be researched for accuracy. I strongly urge you to do just that. Do your own research, not only on the information presented here, but on all information fed to you by politicians in the media, and even by well-meaning friends. Do not blindly accept what you see, read, or hear simply because it fits a narrative to which you personally ascribe. The truth is out there if you're willing to look. Uh-oh, I'm beginning to sound like Mulder. Anyway, many, including a complicit media, like to conflate the issues of global warming with those of a healthy, clean environment. This is a false assertion. No one wants a polluted river. No one wants air that is not clean and fresh. And no one wants our oceans to be teeming with the refuse of human discards. We should all strive daily to ensure our environment is a clean one. It's the right thing to do. We shouldn't need laws on this. We should just do it. But it appears that the quest for power, control, and money overcome the right thing to do every time. Independent of that, The two issues of climate change and a clean environment are wholly separate. One issue cannot be proven to cause the other or even be related. It would be the ultimate hubris to assume that humans can override Mother Nature's awesome power. To get an idea of just how far climate change alarmists will go to promote their message of fear, consider these 100 separate things blamed on climate change/global warming. And no, of course not. I don't expect you to read these, or for that matter, even be able to see them very well. This list of 100 things, fallaciously attributed to climate change as their cause, was generated by the Daily Signal and is available on their website. There, each of these line items is a clickable link providing sources. They did leave out a few other things that aren't true, such as Miami being underwater in a few years, islands disappearing under rising oceans, and even human trafficking. Yes, even human trafficking is caused by climate change, so some inanely argue. All of human civilization as we know it, including our own present time, of course, has occurred during what is called an interglacial period, a warming period between ice ages. More on this in a little bit. As we are all told rather frequently by the climate alarmists, the oceans are going to rise. Well, that part is true, but not in the way and not in the when of what they tell us. As to oceans rising as this current interglacial period is heading to its maximum warmth, that will likely happen, with or without human activity. During the height of the last interglacial period, for example, oceans were about 13 to 20 feet higher than they are today. The same may occur again. But no need for immediate worry. Our current interglacial period's maximum won't happen for another several thousand years. It seems as though anything and everything that can be ascribed to having been caused by or will be caused by climate change, including things that are incorrectly said to actually cause climate change, have been offered. No stone appears to be left unturned. But, my personal favorite of the things said to cause climate change is, well, cow farts. Yep. Bill Nye, the science guy, who is not a scientist, by the way, and is pretty much wrong on everything, advocates taxing cow farts as cows emit methane, a greenhouse gas. Governor Jerry Brown of California signed into California law a bill regulating greenhouse gases coming from landfills, and yep, you guessed it, cow farts. All this smacks of climate alarmists trying just a bit too hard to me, as in a combination of The Boy Who Cried Wolf and Methinks Thou Dost Protest Too Much. Okay, so I'll put in a bit of comic relief. Sue me. And so to continue, the fearmongers who currently spread the climate change story would call me a climate change denier. Far from it. Climate change is real, and so is global warming, but not in the way the fearmongers would have us believe. Climate change has been going on in a cyclic manner over the last 2.8 billion years. Our climate changes from colder periods, ice ages, to warmer periods, interglacial periods, in an almost regular fashion. Currently, we're in the latest of the interglacial periods, and as stated before, we can expect the Earth to continue to warm for the next several thousand years, human activity or not. It should be recognized that the ice ages represent periods of relative calm. Not much in the way of changes as an ice age progresses. The interglacial periods, on the other hand, are actually shorter, more dynamic transitional periods going from cold to warm and back to cold. And these periods, again, occur over thousands and thousands of years. During any one of these interglacial periods, global temperatures proceed in a zigzag up and down fashion over the entire period. Temperatures range from the cold coming out of an ice age to the warmth present during the time of the dinosaurs, for example, and then back to the cold of the next ice age. We are currently witness to this zigzag up and down temperature shifting. Right now, we are about one-third of the way up the temperature rising side of the current interglacial period. We'll get to more on this in a bit. Anyone who predicts that the Earth is warming is stating an obvious, unassailable fact. To be able to discern this is not exactly a feat of scientific wonderment. As this video progresses, the why and the how of that pronouncement will become clear. So before making my points, I'll offer some definitions so as to be consistent throughout. Weather does not equal climate change. Weather is what we observe locally. For example, let's say it's February. The weather in Boston is most likely a lot different than the weather in Miami. Climate, on the other hand, is an average across a geographical area over a long period of time. As this video goes on, keep in mind that the climate alarmists are talking about the global climate, not the climate of a particular region. The subject of human activity causing global warming, i.e. climate change or not, has been the subject of much debate since Al Gore put out his An Inconvenient Truth video back in 2006. For all practical purposes, consider the climate in Florida, that is, the general conditions over a long period of time, is drastically different than the climate at the North Pole. In fact, within the overall climate of the Earth, there are 9 separate classifications for varying climate types. As an aside here, my personal favorites are the desert and the tropical rainforest climates. To illustrate the variability of a climate type within the overall climate of the globe, core samples have shown that every 20,000 years, the Sahara Desert goes from the hot desert we see today to a lush wetlands and then back again. These changes happen suddenly. For about 20,000 years, the Sahara is as we see it today. Then, in less than 200 years, it turns into a wetlands. 20,000 years later, it turns back into the desert again. Again, in less than 200 years. So even the climate of the largest desert on Earth changes over time, and has for millions of years without any help from humans. Exactly what type and degree of human activity do you believe could cause a desert to continually shift from dry to wetlands and back again, spanning thousands of years? Human-generated greenhouse gas emissions? Maybe it could have been cow farts. Hardly. I've been to parts of the Sahara. What did I see there? I mean, besides lots of sand, of course. Camels and snakes and lizards, oh my. Hey, I gotta tell you, it was awfully slim on cows out there. As in none. And precious few people, for that matter. Anyway, the pronouncements presented to us of human activity causing climate change are without context and are meant to misinform those who haven't done sufficient research. The climate change alarmists frequently point to evidence showing that the current global warming can be tracked back to the Industrial Revolution, clearly attributed to humans belching out CO2 from the use of factories for the first time in earnest. In fact, it truly can be shown that global temperatures have risen to some degree since then. Here's an accurate context of temperatures rising since the start of the Industrial Revolution. As can be seen from this picture, global temperatures begin to rise shortly after what is considered the end of the Industrial Revolution. But did one cause the other? No. That would be like offering that because President Lincoln had a vice president named Johnson, caused President Kennedy to have a vice president named Johnson. Ludicrous. There are coincidences. The Little Ice Age was coming to a natural close. It should be expected that temperatures would rise. The historical evidence of this assertion will be presented a bit later. If the Industrial Revolution actually caused temperatures to rise, see the letter B on the picture, then what caused temperatures to rise in like manner at the start of the medieval warming period. See the letter A. Certainly not any human industrial actions, to be certain. This period of time shows both warming and cooling across the planet happened. This is part of what earlier I referred to as zigzags and ups and downs of interglacial periods. Such is the normal progression of the cyclic geological realities of Mother Nature doing her thing. It's repeated over and over again throughout the history of the Earth. Personally, I find it curious that the climate change alarmists have chosen only this single episode of temperatures starting to rise to, in part, make their case. A single instance of one of thousands upon thousands just like it which have occurred over Earth's geologic history? Where was the influence of humans in such other, almost identical temperature rises over billions of years? But such does indeed fit the story of the alarmists, at least that which they wish to convey, independent of inconsequential nature of the data and the total non-relativity of the facts. Stick with me here, my story gets better. Al Gore started this latest fear of global warming / climate change with his video, An Inconvenient Truth, back in 2006. I found the video very interesting, so I started looking at what was presented in more detail. It had more scientific and logic holes than Swiss cheese. According to his video, temperatures were to start rising dramatically just after 2006, but they didn't. Even more disturbing about Gore's presentation is that it showed CO2 preceding temperature growth, hence the calls for decreased carbon emissions. Unfortunately for Gore's premise, core samples throughout history have shown that CO2 rose after temperatures rose, not before. It seems his hockey stick chart was adjusted to fit his story. Why? To further the follow the chase for control and money, that's why. Since the rise of CO2 occurred after the planet rose in temperature, humans' activities relating to CO2 increases are not very likely to cause warming. More plant growth perhaps, but not global warming. Consider, how much CO2 would be too much? This chart shows the percentages of gases in our atmosphere. To create any real issue, the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere would have to increase far, far beyond its current 0.04%. And remember, that 0.04% is after all the human activity over the last 100 years or so, combined with all the volcanic activity over millions of years. Also, the last time there was a significant amount of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, modern humans didn't exist. So what caused its rise back then? Not human activity for sure. Both CO2 and oxygen levels in our atmosphere have varied widely over time. During the Jurassic period, for example, CO2 levels hovered around 2,000 parts per million, as to today's roughly 400 parts per million. Independent of all that, life seemed to do just fine. And with the minuscule impact humans can have on the planet as a whole, we have little to worry about it anytime soon, if ever. And with Al Gore is where my follow the chase for control and money assertion truly begins. Like many of his ilk, he offers do as I say, not as I do. His personal lifestyle carbon footprint at 19,241 kilowatt hours per month has been estimated at 21.3 times that of the average American, at 901 kilowatt hours monthly. Apparently, the combating of global warming by the rules Gore and others prescribe are only applicable to us little people. And it goes beyond poor old Al. An analysis revealed that between 2000 and 2016, lobbyists spent more than $2 billion on influencing relevant legislation in the U.S. Congress toward the reality of the climate change scare. and almost nothing to support a contrary view. These billions and more were spent for research proving human-caused climate change. And with billions of dollars on the table, the data had to be found and fabricated if necessary to support the premise. Staying on the subject of follow the chase for control and money for a bit, we've all heard of the cap and trade or carbon credits scheme. It works like this. You and I both own companies. My company has a greater carbon footprint than does yours. We are each required to register our businesses and are given certificates or credits as to our allowable carbon use. Let's assume that your actual carbon footprint winds up using less than your certificates, and my company uses a bit more. You can sell me your unused credits, so we wind up together being carbon neutral. Carbon emissions have not been reduced at all. However, in order for this to work, yet another large government agency is required to manage the certificates and their transfers, all paid for by the taxpayer. All this created to elicit the feeling that such is necessary for the government to help save us from the dreaded climate change. I personally can conjure up a myriad of ways scams and corruptions could easily creep into this system. This entire global warming climate change narrative is simply to create fear in our people so as for them to become more dependent upon the government for salvation. More control over the people this is. As an aside, I would strongly recommend reading Michael Crichton's 2004 book of fiction, State of Fear. It details a plot to manufacture fear amongst the people to establish dependency by and control of them via fear of global warming. Really. And continuing on the subject of books, George Orwell's 1949 novel 1984 immediately comes to mind. During the research for this video article, I read it quite a bit and used both inductive and deductive reasoning. The results derived from this struck me that the media, scientists seeking money, and politicians' treatment of climate change actually jumped out from the pages of Orwell's books, namely the creation of the Ministry of Truth. If you've not read this book in a while, what I mean can be summarized using Joseph Goebbels' infamous quote, "Repeat aloud often enough and it becomes the truth." And all this goes way beyond the United States. Take the United Nations, please. Sorry, Henny. You know the UN, that bastion of a borderless world with a desire for a worldwide singular government with a healthy dose of anti-Semitism thrown in for a bit of flavoring. Yep, that UN. For those who have not read these or even been aware of these initiatives, they make for very interesting reading. Both the UN's Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. Both deal with a sustainable development. Former Presidents Bush II and Obama were all for these. These initiatives are aimed at a global socialized world using climate change as a catalyst. I'll not dive into the details of them here, but suffice it to say that were these initiatives fully implemented, the concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as we know it, would be but a dim memory of some long-forgotten era. It is truly sad and unfortunate that literally millions across the globe are all too willing to believe this claptrap. I guess it's a lot easier to believe a lie that makes one feel good, that is, having someone else be responsible, than to believe a truth which makes one face up to their own personal responsibility. And the lengths people will go to help further such lies are astounding. Here's a partial list of articles detailing fraudulent data being used to prop up the climate change thesis. These are just a few samples of how data was manipulated to affect the climate change outcome desired. Data not supportive of climate change modeling was left out. Temperature data today, taken from measurement devices located in hot parking lots, when decades ago those exact same devices were in an empty field, were compared. The results of climate modeling were falsified to produce the results desired. The full list of such fudging is far too long to present here. To slightly recap for a minute, true global climate change is measured not in years, not in decades, nor even centuries. It is measured in thousands upon thousands of years. The warmer periods, which we're in now, last anywhere from 10 to 30,000 years. The colder periods, that is the ice ages, last upwards of 200,000 years. The climate of the global warming/climate change dispute specifically relates to the climate of the entire globe, not a defined area. So let's take a look at some truly global data over time. As you can see in the upper left of the picture, cyclic climate change has gone on for a very long time. This is only 1 million years out of a known 2.8 billion years of evidence. But take a look at what has occurred during only the last 10,000 years. The picture on the lower left. The earliest found evidence of the beginnings of human civilization, as we know such, happened near the start of this period. The last ice age officially ended 11,500 years ago, but it didn't happen in a day. Now, look at just the last 1,000 years, upper right of the picture. Notice the wide swings in global temperatures, even though it is during an interglacial period. We had both the medieval warm period, followed by the Little Ice Age, including the Maunder Minimum, the coldest period since the last ice age. So, because we may have a few years of warming or cooling, does not indicate true climate change. What we observe in our lives is merely normal fluctuations of a much longer lasting climate change system. Now consider, in the picture on the left is depicted a typical ice age interglacial cycle. On the right is that same picture with the entire history of human civilization overlaid and lined in blue. Now ask yourself, is the Earth going to experience warming in the future? Of course. No science background needed. Our planet should be warming quite a bit, but again, as yet, it is not as much as expected. Maybe we have great expectations, but it will continue to get warmer, but not because of us. Up until this moment, I have railed against almost everything related to the current theories of that most insidious of religions, the fraud that is the global warming/climate change scare. Climate change a religion? How can I say that? Well, let's look at the core of actually any religion. And this is important. The below definitions do not in any way relate to God. They are descriptions of on-the-ground operations. A religion offers salvation from eternal damnation. Salvation if one believes in and adheres to the rules set forth by the given church. One must firmly believe, even if certain aspects of the church's teachings can't be proven. Climate change offers salvation from a world devastated by the certain actions of mankind. You must believe in and follow the rules set forth by the government in order to achieve this salvation, even if many aspects of what is offered can't be proven to be true or even proven to be applicable. Belief is a wonderful and marvelous thing. But remember, any intersection between belief and fact is purely coincidental. Don't believe me? Look up the words belief and fact in any dictionary. Now, let's move on to see what really causes actual global climate change. Climate change across the globe results from many factors. The answers are both very simple and very complex. The simple answer first: the sun's effect on the Earth over an extended period of time. Now for the more complex answer, still in overview form, of course. First is the waxing and waning of the sun's activity. Second is the tilt of the Earth. Third is the wobble of the Earth, and in combination the fourth, the Earth's orbital eccentricity. Working together in an extremely complex fashion, these four things affect our planet in many, many ways, especially as to real climate change. The sun goes through cycles. An 11-year cycle, moving from a quieter period to one of more robust activity and then back again. This quieter period is referred to as a solar minimum. The more turbulent is called a solar maximum. Changes in these periods are signaled by sunspots, either many and large, or few, if any at all. The more turbulent the sun's activity, the more energy it spews out. These fluctuations in the sun's activity over a very extended period of time contribute heavily toward influencing the Earth's overall climate. The Earth sits at a 23-degree angle from the vertical. This happened almost 4.5 billion years ago when a Mars-sized object crashed into the Earth. During summer, the northern hemisphere leans toward the sun, giving us more heat. During the winter, the Earth leans away from the sun, giving us less heat. The way the Earth tilts is why the seasons are reversed in the southern hemisphere. Had that collision not happened, the Howdy Doody show Princess Summer, Fall, Winter, Spring, for those of us old enough to remember, would have had a different name. Why? Without the Earth's tilt, there wouldn't be seasons, and life on Earth as we know it probably wouldn't exist. The wobble in the Earth's tilt has a cycle of 25,772 years. It is caused by the gravitational pull of the sun and, to a much lesser degree, the moon. As this wobble progresses, it tends to strengthen or weaken the effects of the sun's energy on us all. The Earth's orbit around the sun is elliptical, not circular, and this orbit varies over time, sometimes more circular, sometimes more elliptical. The closer the sun is to the Earth, as you might imagine, the warmer it is here. It takes 100,000 years for the orbit of the Earth to go from closest to farthest and back to closest. Due partially to Earth's orbital eccentricity, before the next age begins in earnest, we'll still have thousands of years to go. Exactly how do these four forces interact to produce a global climate change recurring time and time again? And what calculations would be necessary to marry an 11-year cycle with a 25,772-year cycle, combined with a 100,000-year cycle, infused with in-motion celestial bodies having vastly different masses to arrive at least an approximate answer? I'll leave the answers to those questions up to you. I, for sure, have neither the astrophysics nor appropriate mathematical background to even try. But it works, and has for billions and billions of years, with no help or hindrance from the human species. Seriously, are we really that arrogant to believe that the puny activities of humans can interrupt a warming, cooling process that has gone on for 2.8 billion years that we know of? That our activities can overcome the actions of the sun's relationship with the Earth? Don't be misled by those who wish only control over and political dependence by you. As I close this video article, there should be one takeaway to remember. Activities by humans, if we're not careful and diligent, can have horrendous effects on our environment. On real climate change, nary a bit. Should you still believe that humans during their 0.0000025% of time on Earth can, in any way, disrupt a system that has gone on for billions of years, then all I can say is,
Who's being naive?
hi again. I hope this installment has been beneficial to you, and thanks for watching.